There are moments in life that redefine everything you thought you knew about trust, about family, about the people you've loved your entire life. I'm going to share with you today a story that changed me in ways I never imagined possible. A story about $60,000, a piece of paper, and the brother I thought I knew. My name is Ruth Anderson. I'm 73 years old now, and I spent 42 years working as an accountant before I retired. People who know me would probably describe me as practical, maybe a bit plain. I wear sensible clothes, keep my graying hair short, and I've carried the same leather handbag for the past 15 years. But practical doesn't mean heartless, and that's something I learned the hard way. I'm sitting here on this park bench on a crisp October afternoon, feeding the pigeons like I do most days. The autumn sunlight filters through the orange and gold leaves above me, and it's peaceful here. People pass by, young mothers with strollers, joggers with earbuds, couples holding hands, and they probably see just another elderly woman whiling away her retirement. They don't see the weight I carry, the lessons learned in the hardest way possible. Let me take you back to where this story really begins, long before the money, before the betrayal. I need you to understand who James was to me, or who I thought he was. James came into this world when I was 8 years old. I still remember the day Mama brought him home from the hospital, this tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket, his little fists waving in the air. I fell in love with him instantly. Our father worked double shifts at the steel mill, and Mama cleaned houses to make ends meet. So caring for James often fell to me. I didn't mind. I'd rush home from school to feed him, change his diapers, rock him to sleep, while humming the lullabies Mama had taught me. As we grew older, that bond only deepened. When I was 16 and James was 8, our father died in an accident at the mill. A piece of equipment malfunctioned, and just like that, he was gone. Mama was never the same after that. She kept working, kept putting food on the table, but something vital had broken inside her. So I became more than a sister to James. I became a second mother. I helped him with his homework, attended his parent-teacher conferences when Mama was too exhausted, cheered at his little league games, and scared away the bullies who tried to pick on him. When I was 23, I got my first job as a bookkeeper at a small firm downtown. The pay wasn't much, but I was careful with every penny. I had to be. Mama's health was failing, and James was 15, dreaming of college. I started saving then, not for myself, but for our future, for the family that was all we had left. Mama passed away when James was 17, just before his high school graduation. Lung cancer, the doctor said, probably from all those years breathing and cleaning chemicals. I was 25, and suddenly I was alone with a teenage brother and a mountain of hospital bills. But we made it through. I worked overtime, took on weekend bookkeeping jobs for local businesses, and put James through community college, watching him walk across that stage to get his associate degree, seeing the pride in his eyes. That made every sacrifice worth it. James eventually married a woman named Karen, a sharp-tongued real estate agent with expensive tastes. I'll be honest, I never warmed to her, but James loved her, and that was enough for me. They had 3 children, Michael, Sarah, and little Emma. I sent birthday cards with checks inside, babysat when they needed me, and tried to be the doting aunt I'd always imagined I'd be. Karen kept me at arm's length, but I told myself it was natural for a wife to want her husband's attention focused on their new family. Over the decades, I kept working, kept saving. I never married. There were a few men here and there, but somehow the timing never seemed right. Or maybe I just never met anyone who felt like home. My work became my identity. I was good at it, meticulous with numbers, trusted by my clients. Every month, like clockwork, I deposit a portion of my paycheck into my savings account. No fancy vacations, no designer clothes, no new cars every few years. I drove the same Honda Civic for 18 years. My apartment was modest, my furniture second-hand, but my savings grew steadily. By the time I retired at 68, I had managed to save $85,000. It doesn't sound like much in today's world, I know, but for someone who'd spent her whole life scraping by, it felt like a fortune. It was my safety net, my peace of mind, my insurance against the uncertainties of old age. I'd worked out a budget. If I was careful, if I lived as I always had, that money would last me through my remaining years. I could live with dignity, maybe even leave a little something for my nieces and nephew. Then, 5 years ago, everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening in March. I remember because I just finished my taxes. Old habits die hard, even in retirement. The phone rang just as I was settling in with a cup of tea and a library book. It was James. "Ruth," his voice cracked through the line. "I need to see you. Can I come over?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "Of course, Jamie," I said, using the childhood nickname that always made him smile. "What's wrong?" "I'll explain when I get there." 20 minutes later, he was at my door. The James who stood in my small living room wasn't the confident businessman I was used to seeing. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and there were deep circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "It's the business," he said, collapsing onto my worn sofa. "Ruth, I'm in trouble. Real trouble." James had started his own consulting firm 15 years earlier, and from what I understood, it had been doing well. He and Karen had bought a beautiful house in the suburbs, drove nice cars, took the kids on ski trips every winter. I'd been proud of how far he'd come from our humble beginnings. "The market downturn hit us hard," he explained, his hands trembling as he spoke. "We lost 3 major clients in 6 months. I took out loans to keep things afloat, thinking we'd bounce back, but it just kept getting worse. Now the bank is calling in the loans. If I can't pay them back, I'll lose everything. The business, the house, everything." I listened, my accountant's mind already running through possibilities, calculating risks. "How much do you owe?" "The immediate debt is $60,000. If I can pay that off, I can restructure the rest, keep the business going." "But Ruth, I've exhausted every option. The banks won't extend my credit, and Karen's commissions have dried up with the housing market the way it is." His voice broke. "The kids' college funds are already depleted. Michael starts at state next year, and I have nothing to give him." Then he looked at me with those same brown eyes that used to look up at me when he was 8 years old, scared of the dark, needing his big sister to make everything okay. "You're the only person I can turn to, Ruth. You're the only family I have left." My heart shattered in that moment. I thought of our father, dead at 43. I thought of Mama, working herself to death to keep us fed. I thought of all those nights I'd stayed up helping James with his homework, all the sacrifices I'd made so he could have a better life than we'd had growing up. "I'll pay you back," he promised, tears streaming down his face now. "Every penny, with interest. 2 years, Ruth. Give me 2 years to turn things around, and I swear I'll make this right." I should have thought longer. I should have consulted a lawyer, drawn up proper contracts, protected myself. But this was James, my baby brother, the boy I'd raised, the only family I had left. How could I let him lose everything when I had the means to help? "Let me sleep on it," I said, though I already knew what I'd do. The next day I went to the bank and withdrew $60,000. My hands shook as I endorsed the check. I was handing over 70% of my life savings, the cushion that represented decades of sacrifice and discipline. But I told myself it would be okay. James would pay me back. Family took care of family. When I gave him the check, James hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're an angel, Ruth. I don't know what I'd do without you. I promise I won't let you down." We did do something right. He insisted on writing a promissory note. It was handwritten on a piece of my stationery, but it was there in black and white. $60,000 to be repaid within 24 months, with 3% interest. We both signed it, and I tucked it carefully into my filing cabinet, along with all my other important documents. The first few months, James called regularly to update me. The business was stabilizing, he said. He'd landed a new client. Things were looking up. I'd lie in bed at night, reassuring myself that I'd done the right thing. Then the calls became less frequent. By the end of the first year, I had to initiate contact if I wanted to hear from him. The family visits stopped altogether. Karen had always been cool toward me, but now there was no pretense of family gatherings. Birthdays came and went without so much as a card. When the 2-year mark arrived, I waited. Surely James would call, would arrange to start paying me back. Days passed, then weeks. Finally, I picked up the phone. "James, it's Ruth. I was just wondering about the loan repayment. The 2 years are up." There was a long pause. "Oh, Ruth, I meant to call you. Things are still tight. Can you give me a few more months?" "Of course," I said, though anxiety gnawed at my stomach. "Just a few more months." But a few months became 6 months, became a year. Each time I called, there was a new excuse. The economy was still bad. They'd had unexpected expenses. One of the kids had medical bills, always something. By the 3rd year, I was getting worried. My savings had dwindled to $25,000. I was being even more careful with my spending, but costs kept rising. Groceries, utilities, the occasional medical visit. I needed that money back. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon in September, 3 years after I'd given James the money. I was at the grocery store, comparing prices on canned vegetables like I always did, when I heard a familiar laugh. I looked up, and there, 2 aisles over, were James and Karen, pushing a cart laden with expensive items. Premium steaks, imported cheese, bottles of wine I knew cost $40 each. My first reaction was relief. If they could afford to shop like that, surely they could start paying me back. I made my way over to them, smiling, ready to greet my brother. "James, Karen, What a nice surprise. James's face went pale when he saw me. Karen's expression hardened. Ruth, James said stiffly. Hello. I gestured to their overflowing cart, keeping my tone light. Someone's planning quite a dinner party. We're entertaining clients, Karen said coldly. That's wonderful. Business must be going well then. I looked at James meaningfully. I'm so glad things have turned around. Maybe we could talk soon about starting those repayments. It's been 3 years now, and... Repayments? James's voice was flat, emotionless. What are you talking about? I felt the floor shift beneath me. The $60,000, Jamie. The loan, remember? James looked at me like I was a stranger. His eyes were cold, distant, nothing like the brother I'd known. I don't know what you're talking about, Ruth. I never borrowed any money from you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, certain I'd misheard him. James, please. This isn't funny. You came to my apartment 5 years ago. You were crying. You said you were going to lose everything. I think you're confused, he said, his voice hard. Maybe you're misremembering things. That happens with age. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands were shaking as I fumbled in my purse for my phone. I have the promissory note. You signed it. We both signed it. That's when Karen stepped forward, her face twisted with contempt. Are you seriously trying to scam us right now? What kind of pathetic person makes up stories about lending money to her own family? I've heard about people like you, lonely old women who invent scenarios for attention. I'm not. My voice came out as a whisper. You're delusional, Karen hissed. We never borrowed a single cent from you. If you keep harassing us with these lies, we'll have to consider legal action. Come on, James. She grabbed his arm and started to walk away. James didn't even look back. He just went with her, leaving me standing in the middle of the grocery store aisle, my hands still buried in my purse, tears streaming down my face. I don't remember how I got home that day. I must have driven, but the memory is a blur of pain and shock. In my apartment, I went straight to my filing cabinet with shaking hands and pulled out the promissory note. There it was, real and undeniable. James's signature next to mine. $60,000, 24 months. I sat on my floor and cried harder than I had since Mama died. This was worse than death somehow. Death was final, but this was betrayal from someone still living. Someone who had looked me in the eye and denied our shared truth. For days I barely ate. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, hoping it had all been a nightmare. But morning would come and the reality would crash over me again. My brother had stolen from me and then denied my very existence. I was 70 years old with $25,000 to my name and no idea what to do. Finally, a friend from my old accounting firm insisted I see a lawyer. I made an appointment with a man named David Winters, a kind-faced attorney in his 50s who listened patiently as I told my story. The promissory note spread on his desk between us. Legally, you have a strong case, he said gently. This is a valid promissory note. You could sue for repayment. Hope flared in my chest. Really? But Ruth, I need to be honest with you about what that means. Filing a lawsuit will cost you at least $3,000 in legal fees, possibly more if it goes to trial. Your brother will likely claim the debt was already repaid, or that the note was forged or obtained under duress. Even with this document, lawsuits can be unpredictable. But I have proof. Proof that money was lent? Yes. But if he claims he paid you back in cash, and you can't prove otherwise, it becomes a he said, she said situation. And Ruth, even if you win, and I think you probably would, collecting the judgment is another matter entirely. If he claims he can't afford to pay, the court can't squeeze blood from a stone. I felt my hope draining away. So, you're saying I should just give up? Let him steal from me? I'm saying you need to weigh the costs, financial and emotional. This will likely destroy whatever remains of your relationship with your brother and his family. It will be stressful, drawn out, and expensive. At the end of it, you might win a judgment that takes years to collect, if you ever collect it at all. I sat in that lawyer's office for a long time, staring at that piece of paper that represented my life savings, my security, my brother's promise. Then I thought about the look on James's face in that grocery store, the cold dismissal, the way he'd let his wife call me delusional. I thought about how he'd let me believe we were family, right up until the moment it became inconvenient for him. I want to sue, I said. I don't care about the relationship anymore. That's already dead, but I won't let him pretend this didn't happen. I won't let him rewrite history and turn me into the crazy old woman. Mr. Winters nodded slowly. Okay then, let's proceed. I wrote him a check for $3,000, money I couldn't afford to spend, and we filed the lawsuit. The next few months were brutal. James hired his own lawyer, and just as Mr. Winters had predicted, they claimed the debt had been repaid in cash 3 years earlier. They had no receipt, no proof, but they were betting the court would see it as a toss-up. My nephew, Michael, called me once during this time. He was 21 now, in his senior year of college. Aunt Ruth, why are you doing this? Dad says you're confused, that you're making things up. Mom says you're just bitter and lonely and trying to hurt our family. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him how I'd raised his father, how I'd sacrificed for our family, how every check I'd sent for his birthday had come from my carefully managed budget. Instead, I said quietly, Michael, your father borrowed $60,000 from me 5 years ago. I have his signed promissory note. That's not confusion, that's fact. But Dad wouldn't lie. Your father is lying, Michael. I love you, but I won't be gaslit by my own family. The truth is the truth, whether you choose to believe it or not. He hung up on me. I haven't heard from him since. The trial was held on a gray morning in February, in a small courtroom that smelled of old wood and stale coffee. I sat with Mr. Winters on one side of the room, while James and his expensive lawyer sat on the other. James wouldn't look at me, not once. I took the stand and told my story, all of it, the childhood, the sacrifices, the phone call, the money, the grocery store confrontation. I presented the promissory note. I showed my bank records proving the withdrawal. James's lawyer tried to make me seem senile, confused about dates and amounts, but 42 years as an accountant had taught me to keep meticulous records. I had everything documented. When James took the stand, he claimed, under oath, that, yes, he had borrowed the money, but he'd paid it back in cash installments over the first year. He said he'd given me the cash, whenever we saw each other at family gatherings. He said I must have forgotten. "Do you have any receipts for these cash payments?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor. Ruth's my sister. I trusted her. I didn't think I needed receipts for family. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so painful." The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Patricia Carlson. She looked over her glasses at James and said, "Mr. Anderson, you're asking this court to believe that you paid back $60,000 in cash over the course of a year. Yet you kept no records, no receipts, no bank withdrawal slips showing where that cash came from. Nothing." "Yes, Your Honor, it was cash from my business. I deal in cash sometimes." "And you, a businessman, kept no records of withdrawing or earning $60,000 in cash? The IRS must love you." There was a flutter of nervous laughter in the courtroom. James's face reddened. "Your Honor, my client runs a legitimate business," his lawyer began. "I'm sure he does," Judge Carlson cut him off. "But his story doesn't add up. Miss Anderson has a signed promissory note, bank records showing the withdrawal, and a consistent account. Mr. Anderson has a story about cash payments that magically leave no paper trail." She looked back at James. "Sir, if you'd paid back this loan, you would have asked for your promissory note back, or at minimum had your sister sign something acknowledging repayment. Yet you did neither of these things. I trusted her to destroy it once I paid her back." "But she didn't, and you never asked about it." "Not once in 3 years." James had no answer for that. The judge ruled in my favor. The debt was valid, and James owed me $60,000 plus 3 years of interest at 3%, bringing the total to $65,000, $1,400. I felt a rush of vindication. I'd been right. The truth had prevailed. Then came the second part of the ruling. "However," Judge Carlson continued, "given Mr. Anderson's current financial situation, I'm ordering a payment plan. Mr. Anderson will repay Miss Anderson $400 per month until the debt is satisfied. This will take approximately 13 years to complete." 13 years! I was 71 years old. I'd be 84 when the debt was finally paid, if I even lived that long. $400 a month when I'd given him $60,000 all at once. But I'd won. That was something. That was 5 years ago. Now I sit here on this park bench, and every month, like clockwork, a check for $400 arrives in my mailbox. No note, no phone call, just a check from James's attorney's office. I deposit each one, and I watch the balance grow, slowly, painfully slowly. James and I haven't spoken since the trial. Michael, Sarah, and Emma, the nieces and nephew I helped raise, don't return my calls. As far as I know, they all believe their father's version of events, that their poor, confused aunt sued their dad over money he'd already paid back. Sometimes I pass James on the street. Our town isn't that big. We see each other at the grocery store, at the post office, at the bank. Each time he looks right through me, as if I'm not there, as if I never existed. The loneliness is worse than the money loss, if I'm honest. I'd always imagined I'd grow old with at least some family around me, nieces and nephews visiting, maybe great-nieces and great-nephews calling me Aunt Ruth. Instead, I'm alone. I feed pigeons in the park and read library books and try not to think too much about the brother I lost. But here's what I've learned. Sitting on this bench, watching the world go by, you can't make people be who you need them to be. I'd built up this image of James in my mind, the little boy I'd protected, the young man I'd helped through college, the brother who would always be there for me because I'd always been there for him. But that James either never existed or he died somewhere along the way, replaced by a man I don't recognize. I've also learned that sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. I could have let it go, could have accepted the loss and maintained some semblance of a relationship with my brother and his family. But I would have spent the rest of my life being the crazy old woman who imagined things, who made up stories about loans that never existed. I would have let him rewrite our history, erase my sacrifice, deny my truth. I couldn't do that. My dignity was worth more than $60,000, more than a relationship built on lies and denial. The checks are now going into a separate savings account. I don't spend them. When I die, and at 73, I'm realistic about the time I have left. Those checks, whatever has accumulated, will go to Michael's children, if he ever has any, to Sarah's children, to Emma's children, my great-nieces and great-nephews, who will never know their great-aunt Ruth, but who will benefit from her stubbornness nonetheless. Because here's the thing I want you to understand. I could have let bitterness consume me. I could have spent these last years angry, vengeful, plotting ways to hurt James the way he hurt me. And sometimes late at night, I won't lie, I've had those thoughts. I've imagined confronting him, telling his children the full truth, ruining his reputation. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't give me back the years of sisterhood I'd imagined we had. It wouldn't restore the trust that was broken. It would just poison what's left of my life. So instead, I've chosen something different. I've chosen to take those monthly checks, my vindication, my proof that I was right, and turn them into something good. I've lost my brother, but I won't let that loss define the rest of my life. I won't let his betrayal make me bitter. Every month when that check arrives, I look at it and I feel sad. But I also feel proud. Proud that I stood up for myself. Proud that I didn't let him gaslight me into believing I was crazy. Proud that I'm turning his debt into something that will help the next generation. If you're listening to this and you're young, maybe you can't imagine your family betraying you like this. Maybe you think it could never happen to you. I hope you're right. I hope you surround yourself with people who value integrity, who keep their word, who understand that family means more than convenience. But if it does happen, if someone you love and trust betrays you, I want you to know this. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you petty or vindictive. Protecting your truth doesn't make you bitter. Sometimes the people we love the most become the ones who hurt us the worst, and that's not your fault. You get to decide how you respond to that pain. You can let it destroy you, or you can choose to survive it with your integrity intact. I chose survival. I chose truth. And yes, it cost me. It cost me the family I thought I had, the relationships I cherished, the old age I'd imagined. But it gave me something too, self-respect, the knowledge that when it mattered most, I didn't back down. I didn't accept someone else's version of reality when I knew the truth. The pigeons are starting to scatter now. Someone's dog has bounded into the park and they're taking flight in a flurry of grey wings. It's getting late anyway. The autumn sun is dipping lower, and there's a chill in the air. I'll come back tomorrow, though. I'll sit on this same bench, feed these same pigeons, and watch the world go by. I'll go home to my small apartment and make dinner for one. I'll read my library book and maybe watch some television, and in a few weeks another check will arrive, and I'll deposit it and watch that balance grow. It's not the life I planned. It's not the family I thought I'd have. But it's my life, built on truth, and that has to be enough. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. The people you help won't always help you back. The people you save won't always save you. The people you love won't always love you the way you need them to. But that doesn't mean you are wrong to help, to save, to love. It just means you have to love yourself enough to know your worth. Even when others don't, you have to stand in your truth, even when standing alone. And sometimes, when you've lost everything you thought mattered, you discover what actually does. Your integrity, your truth, your ability to choose forgiveness over bitterness, even when you can't forget. I haven't forgiven James. I'm not sure I ever will. But I've forgiven myself for trusting him, for believing in the goodness of family, for thinking love was enough. Those weren't mistakes. Those were hopes. And there's no shame in hope. The shame is all his. And maybe someday, when he's my age, sitting on his own park bench, he'll realize what he lost when he chose money over family, convenience over honor, lies over the woman who raised him. Or maybe he won't. Either way, I'll be okay, because I know who I am. I know what I did. And I know that when it mattered, I chose truth. That's something no one can take away from me, not even my brother.